Welcome to the Biz Gone Social Podcast. We help entrepreneurs navigate how to get known, get customers, and get the edge over their competition. Here is your host, Lorraine Duncan.
So here we are on the Biz Gone Social Podcast, and I'm so glad to be here. And my promise to you, as always, is to give you a little bit of verbal caffeine that's going to energize your business and help you stay social. Because after all, don't you want to be the business that everyone's talking about? I know I do. And welcome, Nick.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you. I got some actual caffeine here at my tea.
Yeah, me too. We're doing good here. So tell my audience what you do, who you serve, a little bit about your business.
Yeah, so I am a consultant specializing in business-to-consumer companies, particularly specialty goods business-to-consumer companies. So that would be a lot of specialty retail and direct-to-consumer brands. My executive background prior to becoming a consultant was largely in those types of businesses, specialty retail, specialty products with a direct-to-consumer element, as well as a retail distribution element, as well as in personal and professional specialty services in the financial sector. So it's really kind of how I've built my whole career around that. And now I'm, free to work with multiple clients rather than just one company. And I am serving them to help them get where they want to go through process optimization, profitability improvements, and ultimately just good long-term planning.
Yeah, so it seems to me in today's world, we have, there's a threat of, some inflation. We're probably in inflation. Companies are having, there's some big downturn and everything. So how serious is the threat of contemporary inflation, and does it endanger the ability of companies to retain their customer base?
Yeah, I'd say at least in the short term, it is a serious consideration. I think long term, when you just sort of look at the way markets evolve and adapt over time, really it's a deflationary trend. If we look back 40, 50 years ago to the computing industry, and now there's computers everywhere, not just, laptops and PCs and phones, but there's a computer in your watch, there's a computer in your refrigerator. So just look at how over time technology tends to push prices down. But in the short term, it could take a lot of pain to get there. And that's really sort of where we see the inflation. It's like you have inflation and deflation and they're battling it out. And businesses and consumers get caught in the middle of that. And something that I think a lot of people don't understand is that CPI, which is the Consumer Price Index in the United States, is not really a good barometer of inflation because they've changed the formula so many times. The formula for CPI was changed around 1990 to make inflation look lower than it really is. And it was changed before that around 1980 to make inflation look lower than it really is. So if you go back and you look at the true inflation figures based on the older formulas, which is really kind of a more authentic gauge for cost of living, inflation is much higher than is being reported. And as a business owner, you're going to experience some of the brunt of that with your suppliers because your costs are going to go up. And ultimately, that's going to get passed down to your consumer. So really, it's a systemic issue and is definitely something to be concerned about, at least short term.
Yeah, in my business, I don't see it as much, but my husband is a plumbing contractor and his supply house bills have been like over the top. Everything has gone up, and unfortunately, yes, his prices have gone up, and the customers feel it. They really do. It's kind of a weird situation, and I think about I just read a Facebook post yesterday, someone who is in retail. Okay. And he's a manager. I won't mention names or the store, but his store was like rocking it. He's like won several years of sales manager. And all of a sudden I just thought like, it's slow. He's feeling downturn. He's feeling sales obviously are going down. He's feeling it. I was just like, it was a reality check that like, not everybody has a booming business or is doing amazingly well. A lot of people are, and nobody ever mentions that. I talked to somebody who's involved in Airbnb, and they are just bringing in the bucks, and it's amazing. So, like, what do you think the future though of retail is?
Well, I think to an extent, it depends on what type of retail you're in. So, some businesses, like you mentioned, your husband's in plumbing, that's a good recession resistant business. If somebody has a pipe burst or their toilet doesn't work, they're probably going to prioritize fixing that, right? And so in like the retail space, it really kind of depends on what you're selling. Does the consumer view it as a necessary purchase or a discretionary purchase? And if you're selling discretionary, during boom times, that can be great. You can make a lot of money as a retailer during those times. But when economic pressures start to hit, that's where people are going to cut back first. So I guess it really depends on what type of retail you're in and how long the typical purchase cycle is between those items. So, I mean, that would be some good advice for retailers who maybe the vast majority of their inventory and offerings would be more in that discretionary area. I would say, look at, to just sort of diversify your revenues, look at, can you add in some offerings that would be a little more recession resistant or anti-cyclical? And not saying make that your main thing, but at least have something there that can help keep some business in if you start to experience a steep customer downturn.
Well, here's the thing though. So that great advice, by the way, for those that can offer a different product, but like if you're a clothing line, which is discretionary, people, tend when money's tight, that's where they don't go shopping as much. How do you help a business that, has that type of a discretionary, product or, that they're selling?
Yeah. I mean, that can be a tough situation to find yourself in during an economic downturn. And so I would say, in preparation for that, like if you have some time, and I think we still do have some time before things start to get worse, and maybe they won't get worse. I mean, nobody has a crystal ball, so I'm just kind of prognosticating here. But, I would say, do what you can to try to put some cash for operating expenses away for a rainy day, which is just, good advice in your personal life. And it's also good advice for a business. Try to have some cash stored away so that you can survive, make payroll, keep things moving when you have those sorts of a downturn. In retail, like clothing, you don't really have as much the problem of being over reliant on, a particular handful of customers necessarily. It depends on where you're sourcing from. You might have an over reliance on certain vendors who could then squeeze you as they start to feel the pressure. So, maybe diversify your supply chain a little bit. Try to source from different vendors so you have some leverage. You're not locked into, one vendor supplying 90% of your inventory, and then all of a sudden they jack up the price and you're stuck. You don't want to find yourself in that kind of a situation. So those are things you can do to kind of prepare in advance. When it actually starts hitting, it's obviously a lot tougher. Depending on the size of your business, I would say, a lot of times what happens when business leaders, whether that's a big company with boards and executives or a small business, when they start feeling the economic pressures, the first instinct is just, let's cut, right? And to some extent, that's probably a good idea, but you can also hurt yourself long-term by overcutting. Layoffs destroy institutional memory. Your staff is really one of your most important assets. And if you just lay a bunch of people off right away, it's going to be a lot harder to climb out of that hole when the recession ends, and it inevitably will end. So, there's no perfect answer. It's just one of those balancing acts of business. But I would just encourage leaders to, think twice before engaging in large layoffs, cutting too deeply into your future-facing innovation. Just be cautious, but ultimately, live to fight another day is the main principle. So if that's what you have to do to keep the business alive, then that's what you have to do.
Yeah, I love that. I want to switch to a more positive side of this all.
Yeah.
How should business leaders leverage cutting edge technology, like, for instance, AI and the Web3? What are their limitations, risks, and advantages of utilizing this?
Yeah, so that is an evolving and broad landscape. So there's a lot we could certainly talk about. Let's move with the trend. Let's move with the trend. The trend right now is AI. So let's go there. Yeah, so trend is definitely in AI. That's been the big topic this year. I had actually released a book around February of this year on the business use of AI, and it's changing so rapidly. Large portions of what I even wrote then, 7 or 8 months ago, is somewhat obsolete already. So I think that is something to be aware of, is that this is all changing so quickly. Really, there's two extremes you can go into that are both problematic. One is to jump in head first and, do a whole upheaval of your operating model to depend on AI. Don't do that. I laugh when I think of just shortly after ChatGPT went public with its open beta. I saw somebody on LinkedIn, small business owner, trying to hire a quote unquote ChatGPT expert. The technology had only been out for like 2 weeks, hiring a full-time ChatGPT expert for her small business. It's just sort of this idea that, oh, this is the new thing, I need to grab it and go all in right away. That's almost never a good idea. You can find yourself sort of hollowing out your institutional capacity, and technology can be very dangerous if you don't know what you're doing with it. So that's one extreme. The other, I'd say, is just ignoring it is a mistake, because then you'll fall behind the times. You need to be proactive, not reactive. And so really, I think the takeaway lesson with AI for business owners and business leaders is think in terms of how can AI augment what we're doing, not necessarily replace what we're doing. We're really not in a position yet where AI is going to lead to wide-scale replacement of people's jobs. Some jobs maybe, but for the most part, we're not there yet, and we're probably actually a long way off from that. But where we are today is augmentation. AI can make you more effective. It can optimize your workflows. And so that's really kind of how I encourage business leaders to think, is how can I use this technology to make myself and my team more effective without necessarily replacing people.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. I've seen the repercussions of the mistakes that people have made on AI, and they have to remember AI is like a child, so the AI is out there trying to search for an answer, and it wants to have an answer. So it's going to give you just about anything. So you really have to be careful. It's funny. I'm laughing about this now. For years, I always teach at adult education. I teach about social media and, different topics with that. And recently I was asked to teach a ChatGPT course. It's like I feel sorry for the people who are going to be taking this course because I have more negative things about it than positive. But I'll bring in the positive. But I think what's really important is that we use it with caution. And because remember, ChatGPT isn't going to go to jail for anything. It's and why I say that is there was a big case with it. A lawyer decided to use it to look up cases. Like when you're trying to prove something or get a motion, you'll say, Casey versus, I don't know, Abel or whatever. And it looked up cases and they used these cases in court. They almost lost their license, their
Right.
practice law. So this is not something that you want to just take lightly. Just, I like to use it for like, almost like prompts, writing prompts, but sometimes there's better ways to get writing prompts.
And one of the other things, like, because writing is sort of probably the first big use case that people started using it for, like, oh, I don't have to pay copywriters anymore. I can just, all my blog content's going to be written by ChatGPT. Multiple problems with that. First of all, it tends to not be very good writing. It doesn't sound very authentic. But the other thing is there's the search engines are all sort of taking sides with different camps here. So Microsoft, is allying with OpenAI, which is the proprietor of ChatGPT. Google has its own technology. So what they'll start doing is penalizing in SEO content written by the competing, AI. So you could rely on AI to write your blog and get buried by Google as a result. So it's just, there's a lot of risk there. I don't recommend doing that, but I do recommend what you said is like using it for prompts, maybe to help get an initial outline going, something like that. But the final product needs to have that human touch. First of all, it's going to come off better. It's going to market better, but that's how you're going to get around sort of that, the AI SEO wars, which I think are budding.
Yeah. And you have to, you really have to read it. If you're going to use it to write definitely read it. Cause like I did like an experiment and I actually saw Old English being used. Like, well, I don't use Old English. I actually have another program that I like a little bit better, but that I've been using for years. And it helps me with like keywords and stuff. It's so much better. But, with that being said, is what do you think? I mean, in the future, what do you think is going to be, the way, is it going to be the way to go? I mean, do you think that it's really going to take, because we've been talking about it for years before it actually really showed itself. This year, it really showed itself in a big way. So now we don't have all the data out yet, but I think it's very helpful for sure. What do you think is going to happen with it?
Yeah, in large scale enterprise, AI has been developing slowly behind the scenes for a long time. That's really a lot of what we've seen in the data science space, predictive analytics. Really those are all just different ways of looking at AI, machine learning. So, that's already been happening. The big kind of watershed, I think, with what we saw in the past year, mainly with ChatGPT, but then the different offshoots that have started to come, is we now have easily accessible consumer-facing AI technology, and that's really the difference. But yeah, where is it going long term? I think, like we kind of talked about at the beginning, technology tends to ultimately cause a deflationary pressure on the market over a long time horizon. So I think that's probably the direction, is that ultimately AI is going to make things cheaper. It's going to make our lives and our jobs easier. And eventually, people will have to sort of reskill to learn to use that in new ways. Old things may become obsolete. New things will appear. That happens with any kind of technological transformation. I don't think it is coming so rapidly that the sky is falling, right now. My advice is just be aware, kind of keep up with stuff as it's moving, So you don't want to fall behind, but don't go into a panic mode either.
Yeah, absolutely. I something intrigues me about you had, you've run some companies, you've helped some companies out and stuff. But I always wonder, when do you feel it's a good time? Like, your company's, been around for a while, you're about ready to go traveling to the Caribbean. When is a good time to sell? And what's important when you're, when you decide that you're going to sell your business? What is an important factor what are some important factors that need to be in place before you go and sell?
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen a lot of this lately with people really who are of the boomer generation, who are business owners and they're getting ready to retire. I have a relative who's in this situation, built a successful small business to several $1 million over a number of decades, really, and is now having trouble selling the business. So as far as when to do it, I mean, that's really a personal decision. There's a lot of factors that can come into play, but as far as what to do, this is a very extensive topic that we could dive into, but I'd say just quick high level stuff. You don't want to make your company so dependent on you that if you were gone, it falls apart. Because if that's what you've done, and it is what a lot of small business owners tend to do, you've essentially created it to not be saleable, because a buyer doesn't want that.
And it's relationships too. Those small businesses, they have the relationships. It's people want to see, bottom line is in some cases, people want to see the owner. Yeah. They want to see the boss because of the relationships. Yeah, no, I just wanted to touch on that a little bit, because I know that it's, when you're running a company and a business, those things do happen. And so who knows? I mean, what we did with Bill's Plumbing was we changed the name from our last name from Duncan and Duncan Plumbing to a name like the Plumbing Artisans, we call it now. And what we literally did is it made it a little bit more sellable. And we actually are going to sell it to an employee. And that's probably the best way to do it, because most of the people who you're working with now is the employee is who they see mostly anyways. So it's probably going to work out for us. I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
That's terrific. Yeah, that's actually one of my favorite exit methods. If you have someone you can trust who's able to do it, is the employee ownership model. I think is becoming a lot more popular in the United States. Whether you sell to one employee or you sell to a group of employees and it goes into like an employee trust, there's a lot of really cool things that are happening there to sort of keep businesses moving with, both tied to the legacy aspect of it, but also looking forward. So definitely something that I would recommend business owners who are looking to sell, consider your employees maybe as your first potential buyer. You could really find some gems there.
And if they, know that they could be a candidate for someday maybe buying a business, they'll also show a better face of the business too, which is always good. It's always good to have that. It's healthy. Yeah. So I'm going to switch gears totally now. This is the part of the show where we get a little real. What do you love about being in business for yourself?
Yeah. So, I mean, for me, I've switched back in my career multiple times between, being an executive and being an entrepreneur. And there's pros and cons to each of those. But what I really enjoy about what I'm doing now is just being able to work with different clients and help a multitude of people, as opposed to just being stuck in one place. So that's really, I put a high personal premium on that.
Yeah, I love that. And, everybody sees the glamour of people owning their own business, but they don't see what we see every day, the challenges that we see in our businesses. What would you say is your number one challenge as you grow your business or as you try to get on new clients and stuff? What are you most challenged with in today's world?
Yeah. So, I mean, being sort of a solopreneur in my firm, I mean, it's my wife works with me as well, but essentially I'm the one who's doing a lot of the actual client work. It's managing capacity, which is just sort of an ongoing thing. I think, as a business owner, you always have multiple different competing priorities. There's always something else to do, and multiple plates are spinning. And, so you're working with clients or customers, and you're also, doing all the back end stuff and your marketing. And so it's really just sort of managing capacity, which I think is kind of an evergreen problem, no matter what your business is. But yeah, that's always an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. One piece of advice to those that may be in the beginning of their business, or to those that are seasoned, or to those that are thinking of owning their own business, one universal piece of advice that can help them move forward and encourage them a little bit.
I think I would say if you know you have something of value, whether that's a product, a service, whatever it is, something that's going to improve someone's life in some way, then you need to, in your own mind, really believe in the value of what you're doing or aspiring to do. So, I'm sure there's unscrupulous business leaders out there, but for the most part, people really want to serve the customer. They want to do well. They want to make a positive contribution in the world. And so I think when it comes time to overcome the challenges, overcome the imposter syndrome, all these things that you'll struggle with as a business owner, if you hold on to this idea that what you're doing is really valuable for your customer, that is a very powerful nugget to hold on to get you through the tough times and keep your North Star towards success.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I want to thank you for being a part of my show. And if somebody resonated with you, or they need help being consulted, or with their company, or with their whatever they would need help with when it comes to their businesses, and there's so many that probably do need help, how would they get in touch with you? And do you have something to offer to my audience?
Yeah, so everything they would need is on nickgosling.com. I have a free business newsletter that I publish. It's from my homepage there. It's very obvious. You'll see where you can subscribe to it. And then also, if you're in sort of a specialty business to consumer line of work, because that's who I work with, and you're interested in speaking with me, I do also offer a complimentary intro meeting where we can talk about your business and see if it makes sense. It's very easy to self-schedule that right from the website.
Awesome. That's so nice. So thank you again. And everyone out there, this is the Biz Gone Social podcast, and thank you for being a part of it. See you next week. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Biz Gone Social podcast. Find us on Instagram at Biz Gone Social for extra tips. Check back weekly for new episodes. Until next time, stay social.